What do you do when the world's going crazy? Are you frustrated by companies that have gotten millions and billions of dollars from the United States government for bailouts and they're treating you badly? Has the economy led to problems in your marriage? You driving more to drink, drinking more to drive? We'll talk about financial issues, whether or not you should consider debt consolidation or bankruptcy, DUI, or divorce, what the law is regarding these. I'm attorney James W. Davis, and this is It's the Law Weekend Edition. Hey, Crystal, Fernando.
Hello.
Fernando, we all hear about what's going on in Greece and all of how the economy is going bad, and we're looking at the United States knowing that we're going down the same path. You're from Spain, so you've seen the second roll of it. What's happening in Spain?
Well, actually, we're following Greece's steps because we got in so much debt that we're just heading to the same place where Greece is right now.
All right. What are people doing? I know there's some activism going on there. We hear about riots in the streets. Is it really people going crazy in the streets, or is it people trying to make a statement? You're part of that. Tell us what you're doing.
Well, it's more making a statement, making ourselves listening by the government, because we feel like the government is not really taking care of us. They have to take care of big corporations and just forget about the citizens. So we just go through the streets and try to protest about the way they're managing all these crises.
Right. Well, a lot of things that are going on in the United States, a lot of people are looking at bankruptcies. Companies are filing bankruptcies. Of course, a large part of our office work is bankruptcy. And I know, Crystal, you're in college now, and one of the things that's not right now extinguishable in bankruptcy, that's not dischargeable, is the debt that you get for student loans. Tell us about your student loans. How do you feel in this economy with the amount of money you're spending on school?
Well, I think the cost of school is so high right now. It really discourages people from attending college, whereas otherwise they may have gone if the costs were lower. But that's something that really I don't think we can change. But my loans have been around for over 10 years, and during 9/11 is when my rates got locked in. So fortunately for me, I got locked in at a lower rate. I believe it's under 3% at this point, and it's not changed. So that's a good thing. Another thing to note is that while you are in school, that your loans will go into a deferment period. So you're not responsible for any payments on that. And also there are two types of loans when you're in school. There's unsubsidized loans and subsidized loans. Unsubsidized is where the government will pay the interest on the loans, and subsidized, you'll be responsible for the interest on the loans. So that's another good thing to note when you're applying for loans. Make sure you take out the majority that you can that are unsubsidized, so therefore the government will be paying those interests, paying the interest while you're in school.
Do you feel like the job market's going to allow you to make enough money once you're out? Do you have good hope that the job market's there for you to be able to pay these things back?
I do have high hopes. It's just been a goal of mine to finish college, so it's high on my list. But I do know that it's something that just has to be done. Just to say that you have achieved it, you finished your degree. It's really important to employers that they look at that you've actually completed your degree.
Right.
So jobs are scarce, but I'm hopeful.
Well, another thing that's a problem besides the student loans are these companies, some of the mortgage companies have gotten a lot of money from the government, and part of what they're obligated to do is to provide loan modifications for people who are struggling with their mortgage. They got the money that's specifically designed to use this, but I hear tons of people come in my office all the time, and they say, we've sent in the information for the loan modification, and they sent back and said they want something else, and we've already sent that information 3 times. Then when they want a package of the information, they want you to gather everything all together and then send it in. And then after you do that, they want you to send a little bit more. I realized as an attorney, at the beginning I thought people just weren't doing what they were supposed to do. It's the same thing when I first started criminal law. I talked to people who had criminal lawyers and say, hey, I pled guilty to something in a prior offense, but I wasn't really guilty. Of course, the conviction's already there. I can't do anything about it. And the first 2 or 3 people, I didn't really believe that they would actually plead guilty to something that they're saying they were innocent of. But after a while, you hear it so much, you know it's actually true. And recently, and Fernando, you remember this, I had somebody where I got involved with sending in the papers for loan modification. And as I'm talking to the company, I've sent in everything. I've got a list of what they needed. I sent it in personally from my office to make sure they had everything in the bundle. They started wanting more, and they were calling the client. I called and asked them what the situation. They said, we can't talk to you. We don't have anything on file. I said, yes, you do. And I made them look for it to find it on file on Tuesday. On Friday, I'm talking to them again, and they say the exact same thing, that they can't speak to me. And they wanted to speak to the client, and I was very frustrated. This is Fernando happened to be in the office and heard the frustration and closed the doors for me for the rest of the people in the office. But eventually, I got them to send it in. But it's obvious that these companies don't want to do what they're supposed to do. And that's what people need to know, is there's times where you need an attorney to step in and to do, because these companies are not trying. It's not in their best interest to give you the loan. They've already got the money to do it for you. The more they can not do it, the more of that money they get to keep. That's what we've got frustrating with what's going on in the government. Are you guys got any bailouts in Spain that are really kind of being used improperly like that?
Well, I think the corporations really make this whole bureaucracy just to make it hard for the final client to get what they should really deserve. And most of the people just fall down. They just don't keep going asking for it, because there's so complicated to get what you deserve. And they create so many bureaucracies, so many papers you need to send.
That's exactly what they're doing here. The more work, and even when you do it, like I say, even when you do it, they act like they didn't receive it. They must have some sort of system that actually intends to lose this information from people. Also, as far as in the bankruptcy category, there's also a lot of debt consolidation. People are interested in debt consolidation. A lot of people want to pay their bills, so they think a debt consolidation may be better than a bankruptcy. The problem is that a lot of the debt consolidation companies, none of them can make a company be obligated to it. And most of the times they will take a series of monthly payments, and they'll begin keeping all that money, paying it to other attorneys, even attorneys in other states, to do really what they can't do. That's negotiating with other companies. And they really can't force these companies to do anything. And people pay for, I've had people come in after a year and a half of payments, paid over $7,000 in. They've had one debt that was consolidated, and they're being sued. But a bankruptcy can consolidate the same as a debt consolidation. And the other companies are forced to go along with it. So people need to be very careful with debt consolidation. I know you've looking at student loans, but you're not at a point where you've ever needed to really consider any kind of debt consolidation, are you?
I mean, I would like to know more about what that is exactly, because I've never heard of that. Is that where a company just takes on the majority of your debt and pays it off accordingly?
A debt consolidation is where you have one company come in and they look at all of your debts and they try to negotiate. They say, this person can't, let's put a bunch of money together. And so they might take, like for example, the people who paid $7,000. They had a series of different companies that they owed money to, $5,000 to one, $17,000 to one, $3,000 to one. And whereas a bankruptcy would pay a little bit to each one of them along, and they would be forced to go along with it, debt consolidation tries to negotiate with that company. So in this case, they had paid $7,000, and the debt consolidation company goes and offers for a $5,000 debt $2,000. So they wound up paying $2,000 to negotiate out a $5,000 debt, which would be good. But they can't force the other one. So the problem is that the people, after paying $7,000, only got a $5,000 debt paid. And then the companies were suing them, and they couldn't, there was no obligation for them not to, so they were forced to have to defend lawsuits, and the debt consolidation companies do not do that. Whereas a bankruptcy is the lawsuit, and it does defend that.
So the companies are at fault there.
Well, the companies have the legal right to receive the money, and they might have started it at a reasonable interest rate at 5% or something along those lines, and then it may be at 28% at this point. So the money is doubling or tripling. So it might have been a debt that was initially $4,000 or $5,000, and now it's $20-something thousand because they just weren't able to pay, and the interest was building up so quickly. So a lot of those things will happen.
Just one more question. Does that affect your credit score at all when you do a debt consolidation?
Well, debt consolidation will, because all of those will be compromised debt. Bankruptcy will also affect your credit score. And a lot of people wonder, how does this affect my credit if I go into a bankruptcy?
Right.
And the thing is it could do either help or hurt, because companies that look at a bankruptcy look at your credit as being somebody who didn't pay some of their debt. But the bankruptcy puts a fine line there. It stops here. At this point of bankruptcy, it stops, and you can rebuild your credit after that. The good thing is there's two things companies look at. One is, how much do I owe? And when you do a bankruptcy, you don't owe anything. That becomes a very good score for you. And the other part is, what is my past history? And if you've already been paying your debts late, you've already got the bad past history, and the bankruptcy puts the line in the sand and says, my past history stops here.
Okay.
Whereas if you can keep with a debt consolidation, that continues to go forward, and you still have a late payment. A late payment takes you 5 years. There you are.
Not a good idea there.
We'll be back in 30 seconds to talk about divorce and all the problems that go along with that. It's easy to make the mistake of driving after you've had too much to drink. The consequences for this error can be devastating. You may lose your license even before you've gone to court if you do not take action within 10 days of your arrest.
Your privilege to drive, insurance rates, and court costs can all be very expensive. I'm attorney James W. Davis. DUI crosses a large section of society. However, don't take it lightly. Contact my office and let us help you put it all in perspective.
Whether it's the economy or just because you've got a jerk of a spouse, sometimes we have to consider divorce. It's not the first choice. Most people would rather stay together and work things out, but sometimes it's the only option. Crystal, you know why divorce is so expensive?
Why?
Because it's worth it. Sometimes there's a lot of things going on. People don't understand what's going on with the divorce. They feel trapped. And a lot of people at the end of a marriage, when the marriage starts dissolving, they start contemplating divorce. Many times it's led to by financial hardship. And DUI, we'll be talking about pretty soon, a lot of times those are being led to by financial hardship. So when people are in a divorce, what would you imagine as being the main consideration, Fernando?
Well, probably the economy that goes around the marriage and how you split all together the kids and all the family issues that involves getting it all apart.
And in Spain, is the law consistent throughout Spain on how you would do a marriage, how you do a divorce?
Well, usually it's kind of unfair because most of the times it's the wife gets everything. They usually get the kids, they get most of the money, the house, and they usually get everything. You need to have a really, really bad wife to get some of what was yours before.
Okay, so Spain still favors the wife in a situation. The United States did that several years ago, but the United States has gotten more equally divided. And what we have in Georgia is considered equitable distribution. And that's really considered what's fair. A lot of people hear equitable and they think that means it's equal, but that's not right. What equitable means is that it's something fair. So if you go into a marriage and you have a home, or if during the marriage you inherit some property from your parents or your grandparents, then typically if you don't use that and use marital funds for that, that's still considered your property. It's not something that you have to share, with your spouse. And if you've worked and gotten a job and made a lot of money, and you've got a job that continues to make a lot of money, if your wife didn't or husband didn't contribute to that, then they might not be entitled to anything just because you make more money than they do or there's a disparity of income. So Georgia looks at a lot of different things along those lines with deciding on what's fair. And Crystal, you talked a little bit ago about what happens when there's children involved. And you were asking a little bit about whether or not there was some courses. There are counties, some of the counties in Georgia that require a parenting course for divorced parents. So as you go through divorce, you may be required to do something along those lines.
And both parents are required to go to the course?
And both parents would be required to go to the course.
Okay.
And Crystal, what do you see as primary things that people or situations that you might imagine that people might be when they're contemplating divorce, what they might want to consider?
Well, in talking about the two different types of divorces that can be filed, I think a lot of it depends on the status of their relationship. Sometimes when people are in agreement, it's easier to do an uncontested divorce. But those who do not get along, tend to drag it out more, I think, and go for the more contested divorces.
Right. Many times a lot of people want to contest a divorce. And we'll probably need to tell there are two types of divorces, contested and uncontested. And contested just means that we're fighting about something. It doesn't matter how small that item is, that we're fighting about something. Uncontested means everything is agreed on by the parties. Who gets the debt? If it's in the debt that's in one person's name versus the other, each person gets their own debt, or they share some debt, or one person pays the other one amount to make up for the debt. All of those things have to be agreed upon and uncontested, but it's much, much cheaper. So a lot of people need to consider that. And what do you see of, what do you know of have you heard of something that maybe the most ridiculous thing you've heard of your friends or family or people that you know of that may have been arguing about something in a divorce?
Well, I just know that people can drag it out for many years, and to me that seems like the hardest way to go. When you're going to get a divorce, it seems like you would want it to be over with very quickly and very easily and move on with your life. So in my opinion, I don't really understand why people drag it out for many years. In cases where children are involved, I can understand it being a little more difficult, and it seems like those are the cases that tend to go contested. And it's because of the children.
A lot of times if the children are the issue, if somebody is wanting more custody or wanting they believe their spouse has become some sort of abusive spouse and they don't want then a lot of times those are issues that are a genuine issue to make sure they get enough custody of their own child. A lot of times it's the father that is sort of edged out by weekend visits and stuff like that, where they may want to fight for their rights for at least a joint type week on, week off, or an equal amount of visitation. But those are probably really serious divorce types. Sometimes people are doing like what I would consider less serious thing, maybe the same argument over a cat or a dog, which may be important but may not be worth tens of thousands of dollars to do in a divorce case.
Yeah, I've seen it get crazy with divorces. I know it can be really rough.
Right. And sometimes it's just out of spite. We have people who may not have any real interest in any other property. They just don't want to grant the other party a divorce. They think the other person's about ready to move on with their life and get married to someone else or have some other relationship, and they want to make it as hard for that person as they can. And if they've got the money to do it, sometimes they do it. And sometimes if they don't have the money, they'll try their best to find some way to do it anyway. Well, that's it for today on divorce, and we'll talk about DUIs and maybe the legalization of marijuana in 30 seconds.
There's never been a time when more people were struggling with debt. If you find yourself under pressure with potential foreclosure, repossession of your car, or phone calls from creditors that you just can't pay, then you need to know your rights. I'm attorney James W. Davis. We can assess your situation and help you decide whether a bankruptcy or other debt relief may be your answer. Debt relief consultations are free. Come see us and know your rights.
James W. Davis and Associates, attorneys at law.
When was the last time you were at a party and you wondered if you were sober enough to drive? That's a problem that many people are faced with on our streets today. We've got Mothers Against Drunk Drivers who've been active for a number of years in making sure that DUI laws are some of the strongest in the world. Many times a DUI is worse for credit, worse for the cost overall to someone's life, and worse for jail time even than somebody who's done other more heinous criminal acts. And oftentimes it's not the intent, but just somebody's bad decision. So what's the point that we decide to continue to drink and drive? Fernando, how are things over in Spain with DUI? Is that a regular occurrence there?
Well, we're getting pretty tougher on that issue right now, but just for the last 10 years. Before that, it wasn't that big a deal, really. Now we have get into a points license system where you can lose points with the tickets that you get for DUI or speeding or whatever kind of ticket.
And here a lot of people ask, what should I do if I'm stopped? What should I do if I've got a DUI? What have you heard, Crystal?
I've heard to roll your windows down, let all the air out of your lungs, before you get pulled over. My advice is just not to drink and drive. It's not smart, puts everybody's life in danger, and it's just not a good decision at all.
Right. And oftentimes, though, we go to a party, we have a drink, 2 drinks over 2 or 3 hours, and we feel like we're okay to drive. And we start kind of calculating, is it worth getting a taxi? Is it worth figuring out how to get my car? Personally, since for many years, if I've had a couple of beers or a couple of drinks, I prefer to get a taxi, and that works as long as you have some sort of method to retrieve your car. But a lot of times that creates problems for people as well. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens if you come to a roadblock and you're stopped and you've had a couple of drinks? What should you do, Fernando?
Well, I guess whatever the officer tells you to do, but...
Okay, that's an interesting suggestion. Let's see where that goes.
But I don't know. I usually don't drink much, so it's kind of hard for me to talk about this, but I can't imagine how could you get the car being really drunk, and I don't see where do you draw the line on whether it's dangerous or not to drive with influence of alcohol.
Well, in the United States, or at least in Georgia, we have 2 methods to determine whether or not it's over the line. One is a hard legal limit, and that's 0.08. So if your blood alcohol content is over 0.08 or is 0.08 or over, then you're actually legally DUI, a legal DUI. If you don't, if the police officer can't prove what your blood alcohol content is, or if it's lower than that, but your driving is impaired, they can do a less safe DUI. And then they have to prove that however you were driving was actually less safe than you would be driving normally. So those are the 2 types of DUIs that may come about, and that's how they draw the line. Many times they'll give you a roadside test. They'll make you touch your nose, lean back, touch your nose, say your alphabet, may have you holding your foot up and that type of thing. And many people wonder what to do in those situations. And I'll tell you this, everybody's answer on how much have you had to drink is 1 drink, 2 drinks. And what a lot of people need to do, rather than what you say, do whatever the police officer says to do, a lot of people need to exercise what we call a right to remain silent. Because if you've really had more than 2 or 3 drinks or 1 or 2 drinks, you don't really want to start lying right there at the beginning of the conversation. And if you have actually had 1 or 2 drinks, it's probably not going to be believed anyway. So sometimes you might want to say, I'd prefer to talk to a lawyer before I answer questions that might incriminate myself. The other thing is the breathalyzer that happens at the station. The roadside breathalyzer is not actually admissible in a court of law. So you might blow in the roadside breathalyzer and it might register 0.08 or 0.09 or 0.17, whatever it registers, but that's not going to be able to come into a court of law. So you have to look at the real decision on whether or not you're going to utilize the breathalyzer will come at the station, and you're obligated there. The roadside breathalyzer, you don't have to blow at all. The police officer needs some evidence that you're DUI to arrest you. If you don't blow on that roadside breathalyzer, which you absolutely have the right to refuse, then maybe they don't have evidence that's sufficient to arrest you unless they show that you're impaired. But the one if you don't take the one at the station, then that can lead to a year suspension of your license automatically, administratively, and you probably need to talk with a lawyer on what you should do in those situations. So a lot of times people come to my office and they've refused. A lot of times a refusal is actually better. People ask regularly, I think you've heard it before, Crystal, people say, should I blow on the breathalyzer or should I not? And the problem with the answer to that is sometimes it depends.
I've heard you should request your own test of your independent choosing at your own location.
If you believe you're sober, I mean, if you know you're just trashed, then it's probably not going to do you any good to just further prove their evidence, which is you go and ask for a sample of your blood to be taken, and then it shows instead of what they register as 0.09, they show you as 0.12. But if you're right there near the limit, 0.08, 0.09, you may want your own test to further, because it's possible that you just got through drinking and the breathalyzer test is registering a little bit high, that with some time your actual blood alcohol content is lower than what the breathalyzer may indicate. But normally they'll correspond pretty closely.
I feel like a lot of people risk it and really drink and drive many times before they're ever caught. And then they're in a world of hurt, at that time.
That's true. There's a lot of people who seem to consistently do this. There's the group of people who just simply don't care and they just keep on drinking and they put people at risk. But then there's also a group of people who try not to. They're very cautious and they go a little bit over the limit and they might have barely missed it. And next thing they know, they find themselves being arrested and all of the charges that go along with it. And maybe there's defenses to it that they haven't yet realized. So different things matter, but the best thing that somebody needs to do is they need to get some representation if they get a DUI, because the consequences are much greater. Even though the cost of DUI representation is often pretty high, the cost of just taking the DUI is much greater than that if there's a chance that you might be able to reduce that to something less effective. Last thing I'd like to talk about with regard to different issues is the legalization of marijuana. We know new states in the United States have made it legal. We know it's been legal in California for medical use for quite a while. What's happening over in Spain with marijuana use?
Well, we don't have any kind of legalized marijuana. We just got kind of decriminalized, so you can pretty much carry marijuana on the streets and all you can get is a ticket for it, but you will never go to jail unless you have like huge quantities of marijuana with you, and it's considered selling, but not for your personal use. You can grow your own marijuana at your house, that's legal. You can use the marijuana at your house, that's legal. The only thing it's illegal is to take it out of house, and it's just a fine that you're going to take for it.
Okay. And here we have problems that somebody can be DUI marijuana or a DUI other than alcohol for many different kind of drugs. So people also have to be careful that what they're doing, even if they're taking a prescription medication, some of these medications say don't take while driving, don't take while operating heavy equipment. And there are people who wind up getting a DUI because they took some legal prescription medicine, found themselves stopped by the police officer, and realized that they probably were not in the best state because of the effects of those medicines. Those people as well need some sort of representation for that.
Our Constitution guarantees us a presumption of innocence. If you've been accused of a crime, do not believe it. When jurors walk in the courtroom, they want to believe that the person in the defendant's chair is guilty. No one wants to believe that a person can be accused of a crime, arrested by the police, jailed, brought to trial by the district attorney, and sat before a judge and jury if they're innocent. I'm attorney James W. Davis. If you've been accused of a crime, you need an attorney who understands that.
James W. Davis and Associates, attorneys at law.
If you're faced with DUI, divorce, bankruptcy, or any other legal issue, choose your attorney carefully. Often a free consultation may not be a great benefit. You may find yourself with an attorney who wants you to follow blindly. You should be a part of analyzing the risk and the rewards of every action in your case. We offer a free consultation for bankruptcy and personal injury because most people considering bankruptcy and personal injury will benefit from these services. However, in other areas of law, we charge for consulting. And this is because people need advice on whether it's even appropriate to hire an attorney. You need advice you can trust, not advice to ensure you become a client. Remember, nothing in this program is designed to be legal advice. If you have a legal concern, you should consult an attorney. You can contact our office, James W. Davis and Associates, at 478-742-1440. Remember to send your legal question to It's the Law at 41NBC.com. And tune in every Wednesday at 6 here on 41NBC, where we'll answer those questions. Also, check out our firm's website at defendmacon.com. I'm attorney Jay Davis, and when it looks like litigation, you need us on your side.